everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Today's webinar is on key factors to write SOPs and work instructions. My goal is to have you understand how important they are and how the techniques that you need to follow to make sure they're effective and acceptable both for your company and for any inspection for the agency. Today's webinar, we're going to go over what is an SOP, agencies requiring SOPs, why even use these things, SOPs versus regulations, SOP issues and related citations, the auditor's cheat sheet, SOP controls, SOP life cycle, SOPs every company should have, sections every SOP should have, summary, references, and then, as Ricardo mentioned, we will go into a Q&A session. You will notice two things in this agenda. The first thing is that I do not use the name work instructions here, even though the name is in the title. The reason for that will be revealed in a slide later on. Also, just to let you know, and this is not mentioned in the agenda, I am going to be building a little bit of a mystery during this webinar, where I will be giving you all the clues of what needs to happen for you to write good SOPs, but the actual answer to the mystery will be revealed almost at the last slide. So this is going to be not how to write the SOPs, but where to find all the reference material. So let's start off with what is an SOP, and what is very important to know or notice or make sure you remember is an SOP. It's not a real SOP until it has been formalized. So it's a formal document that basically you have signed off, has been approved by the appropriate authorities, and they basically tell you how to perform a task, and not just how to perform a task, but very importantly, how to document the performance of that task. As the agency says, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So just performing a task is not sufficient in our industry. We have to document that we performed the task. Step-by-step instructions. And the other thing that's extremely important, an SOP needs to be specific enough to be clear and then flexible enough to be useful. This is something that maybe you want to take a note of and remember, but an SOP needs to be specific enough to be clear and flexible enough to be useful. And basically it gives us industry best practices, especially in an industry where quality standards exist. Now, there are different kinds of SOPs, and people may not be aware of them, but the two main ones that we'll talk about today are the big picture documents, as I call them, and the how-to documents. Now, these are both for regulated environments. There are documents for non-regulated environments. These are out of scope for this webinar, so we're not going to talk about anything that needs to be in a non-regulated environment. We're only going to deal with regulated environment documents. So let's start off by looking at the big picture documents. These documents, I call them big picture. I did not really know what to call them, but they are really more at a strategic level. They describe what the company will be doing. They're really SOPs, even though they might have names like policies, plan, a quality plan. The really SOPs need to go through the SOP process. For those companies that are multinational, you might find that these are global documents but will impact your local SOPs, which is very important to take note of. And unfortunately, because they're global documents, sometimes you might not even know they're there. If you do have a headquarters organization, if you like, always check with them first when you're trying to write a new SOP, because they might actually have that document. I've seen companies where the organization, say, was in Switzerland, and they had an SOP for an organization in the U.S., The SOP said the U.S. company is in scope, yet the U.S. company was not aware of this, and we're trying to rewrite all the SOPs from scratch. So be very careful of this. If you're a multinational company, you really need to check with headquarters to see whether there are SOPs that impact you or that you can reuse.